Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayanti Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Goswami, Volume 1, A Lifetime in Preparation, India, 1896 to 1965, Chapter 8, New Delhi, Crying Alone in the Wilderness. Without income or institutional shelter, Abhay began staying in various homes in Delhi, living from week to week wherever he received an invitation. In terms of food, clothing, and shelter, these were the most difficult times he had ever gone through. Since his childhood, there had always been plenty of food and good clothes, and no question of where he would live. He had been the pet child of his father, and he had received special guidance and affection from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. But now Abhay sometimes felt alone. Homeless, he moved around Delhi from one temporary residence to another, a Vishnu temple, a room at the Kapoor College of Commerce. But he was seeking donors, preaching from Bhagavad Gita, writing. His goal wasn't to find a permanent residence, but to print his transcendental literature and to establish and join forces with a pure, powerful movement for spreading Krishna consciousness. And obviously, that time there were no computers or laptops or USBs. He was having all his books or manuscripts or pages written, and he was moving everything with him. Abhay made a list of several books he wanted to publish. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in Hindi, Gita Upanishad in English, Science of Devotion, English, Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, English, Message of Godhead, English, Bhagavaner Katha, Bengali. But to print, he needed donors. He called on wealthy men in their offices and homes, presenting his manuscripts and explaining his mission. He had a list of donors, but few responded. And when he did receive a donation, it was usually only 5 or 10 rupees. Occasionally, he would receive a letter of appreciation or endorsement. One appreciation came from Narayan Das Rai Bahadur, a retired executive engineer and secretary of the Birla Mandir Trust, who had attended a public reading Abhay had held in the presence of a popular guru, Mother Anandamayi. Impressed by Abhay's reading from his Hindi Chaitanya Charitamrita, Mother Anandamayi had donated 50 rupees and suggested that Abhay also visit a well-known sadhu, Shri Hari Baba, who was lying ill in the hospital. Abhay, accompanied by Narayan Das, had then visited Hari Baba, who had claimed that Abhay's reading put him into ecstasy. Meanwhile, Narayan Das was becoming inclined to help, and in December he wrote a letter suggesting that everyone extend their helping hand for the successful publication of Sri A.C. Bhaktivedanta's various writings in Hindi, English, and Bengali. I wish him all success in his noble attempt. Abhay would show this and other such letters to prospective supporters. In Delhi, it was not difficult to see government ministers, judges, lawyers, business executives, religious heads. There was always someone willing to hear seriously and occasionally to offer support. Thus, Abhay, with the 2 dhotis and kurtas the Gaudiya Sangha had supplied him, with his ability to preach and convince, but with little support and no fixed residence, continued his preaching undaunted. So this was when 1953, 54, something like that. So he was already 57, 58 years old, not a young man, but still moving around. Writing and trying to publish was only half his effort. The other half was taking parts in efforts for a world movement, like the League of Devotees. Through Narayan Das, Abhay inquired whether there might be a way he could do his work under the auspices of the Birla Mandir, one of the largest and richest temples in Delhi. Abhay proposed that he be put in charge of propaganda in the English language, both within India and abroad. Since Narayan Das considered himself a follower of Sanatana Dharma, Abhay wrote to him explaining how the teachings of Bhagavad Gita set forth the real Sanatana Dharma. Abhay had many ideas about how Sanatana Dharma, as eternal religion for all living beings, could be expanded and practically applied if Narayan Das but help. I want to train up 40 educated youths to learn the science of transcendental knowledge and just prepare them for going to foreign countries for missionary work. To start immediately an English paper or to receive my paper or to revive my paper back to Godhead in the style of Illustrated Weekly of India. To organize a Sankirtan party, we shall not be only of good singers and musicians, but must also be used to practice sadhana or self-realization. Abhay promised that as soon as he had done some groundwork, he, along with men and equipment, could start for foreign countries to propagate this missionary work. But he admitted also that he was externally in dire straits. Kindly do arrange for the above immediately and give me a proper place to live. I must remove from this temporary quarter by Monday, next latest. The directors of Birla Mandir did not take Abhay up on his offer, but he thought of another way of engaging them. He would hold a public meeting at the Birla Mandir to help generate interest in the League of Devotees. He approached R.N. Agarwal, president of the Delhi Municipal Committee, who, after hearing the names of several respectable people who would be attending, agreed to preside over the meeting. Abhay set the date for December 22nd and printed 500 announcements and 200 invitation cards. All he is doing on his own, no help. Striking a cosmopolitan note, he stated in his announcement, by the grace of the Almighty, Delhi is becoming the center of cultural association of the world. The leaders of both Russia and India had recently pointed to the need for cultural contact between all nations. But the highest culture, Abhay suggested, was scientific spiritual knowledge. Therefore, the best cultural resources in the world existed in India. And these resources, Abhay stressed, should not be left to the unorganized sadhus and sannyasis, but should be taken up by the important members of society in an organized way. The December 22nd Hindustan Times listed the meeting of the League of Devotees in the today's engagements column, along with the announcements for meetings of the Rotary Club, the Tagore Society, the Indian Council of World Affairs, Bharat Scouts, and the Indian Pharmaceutical Congress. The League's meeting began with a kirtan led by Professor H. Chand and then A.C. Bhaktivedanta, founder and secretary of the League of Devotees, explained his movement's objectives. Then Narayan Das spoke and afterwards read a number of proposed resolutions from the founder's secretary, attesting that the persons present supported the League of Devotees, and they recommend that the central government of India also support it as a movement for world peace based on Gandhian principles. After adoption of the resolutions, the meeting closed with another kirtan and prasad. Abhay was convinced that if his well-wishers and fellow humanitarians would support him on a grand scale, he could create a movement for world peace based on the principles of devotional service to Lord Krishna. But his role was simply to present Krishna consciousness to whomever he could. The results were up to Krishna. Abhay was aware that the good intentions of most of the participants in his Birla Mandir meeting would not go past that one meeting. But he wasn't discouraged. Through all his tireless evangelism, he maintained a philosophic jollity. In one sense, he was already fully satisfied. He was happy to be working on behalf of his spiritual master. Although he was changing addresses so fast that his mail could hardly catch up to him, he wrote a newspaper ad for a home study course, educational. Study the spiritual secret of Bhagavad Gita at home by correspondence and be a strong man. Full course fee rupees 50 only. The instruction is imparted not in the ordinary imaginative way of qualified interpretations, but in the parampara system of preceptorial succession. All questions are properly solved. Apply AC Bhaktivedanta. Students of all communities and nationalities are welcome. But again, he was moving around so much. Where would students go to attend this course? He had not published Back to Godhead in 4 years, since 1952. So this is already 1956. But he decided to revive it. Back to Godhead was a mission worthy of his full attention, and it took all his efforts to collect the funds, compose the articles, see to the printing, and then distribute 1,000 copies. The money he would raise by obtaining interviews and soliciting donations. One donor and friend was Justice Bipin Chandra Mishra, a Supreme Court judge in New Delhi. Justice Mishra, he used to come to me once a month. I gave him donations for his paper. It was only a 4-page magazine, but it showed his study of the subject and his earnestness and his devotion to Lord Krishna. He appeared to be a very simple man and modest, and it was pleasant to talk to him. He had a smiling demeanor. The main thing was his humility. He could talk with affection and confidence, and he knew we were discussing things near to God. So every talk with him would sublimate us. I was a rather important personality at that time in religious affairs, but he would not be expected to make any contribution to the main religious life of Delhi at that time because of the language difficulty and because his aim was to reach the English educated persons, not the Hindi ones. And also because his means and his popularity were not at all established. The magazine did not have a wide appeal among these people. Other religious leaders were all well established. The only thing that impressed one was worth noticing at that time was the simplicity of his abiding faith in God's name and his mission. So, writing articles was no problem. By the grace of his spiritual master, he was neither short of ideas nor unable to set them down. Translating and commenting on the Vaishnava scriptures, his pen flowed freely. He was inspired by the miracle of the press, the Brihad Mridanga. So, Brihad Mridanga, this Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj said that about books. He said when we beat on Mridanga in the Kirtan, the noise would go maybe 1 block or 2 blocks. But if you present a book and the person he takes it to his home, and maybe he's living in some other city, so he takes it there, maybe some other country, he takes it there. So that this Mridanga will make noise, so make Harinam, Kirtan, farther than the Mridanga that we use in Kirtan. So he called it Brihat. Brihat means big Mridanga. The work of writing his message down and printing it 1,000 times with the awareness and urgency of speaking directly to everyone, not just people in Delhi or India, but everyone, would obey into an ecstatic meditation. He would contemplate how copies of Back to Godhead could reach through thoughtful people who might read them gratefully. Nor was maintenance a problem. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukdev Goswami had declared that a devotee's problem was not food, clothing, or shelter. If one had no bed, he could always lie on the ground and use his arms for a pillow. For clothes, he always find some rejected garments in the street. For food, he could live on fruits from the trees. And for lodging, he could stay in the mountain caves. Nature supplies all necessities. A transcendentalist should not flatter materialists to maintain himself. Of course, Abhay wasn't living in the mountains or jungle, but in the city of New Delhi. Yet he had virtually adopted the renounced mode Shukdev had suggested, not to punish his body or to prove himself pure and uncompromising, but because he had to live in poverty if he wanted to regularly produce back to Godhead. For Abhay, it was a great labor of love, and purchasing paper for printing became a priority even before eating. Neglecting his personal needs for preaching was a manifestation of his faith in Krishna, of which Abhay suffered no scarcity. He had full faith that if he served Krishna, he would be provided for. To work alone was not an insurmountable problem. It was pleasant and simple. It was better than having to manage the neophyte inmates of Gaudiya Sangh. The ecstasy of working hard to serve a spiritual master was not a problem. The problem was the condition of the world. According to the Shastra, the current age, Kali Yuga, would create continual degradation in society. And Abhay could see this evidence every day in Delhi. Delhi, formerly known as Hastinapur, had been the ancient capital of King Yudhishthira, who 5,000 years before, under the patronage of Lord Krishna, had been the most opulent king in the world, and whose citizens had been fully protected and provided for. Now, after 1,000 years of foreign subjugation, India was again independent, and New Delhi was the capital. But can we imagine when Maharaj Yudhishthira was ruling and now? Huge difference, huge. Yet, even in Abhay's relatively brief 60 years of experience, he had seen Indian culture, which in his childhood had retained much of the original purity of the Vedic age, degrade. In 1956, it has degraded. How much it has degraded now? Now he saw a society in which his countrymen were victimized by the propaganda that they could be happy in gross materialistic indulgence. The British had introduced tea, tobacco, meat, and factories. And now, even after independence, they were a part of India's new way. These were part of India's new way of life. Having driven away by the British, the Indians were imitating Western ways. And India's leaders were deliberately ignoring the Vedic principles of God consciousness, the very treasures India was meant to distribute to the whole world. Abhay had seen how India had abandoned her spiritual heritage and gone running after the modernization of the West. But now, where was that material advancement? Were Indians any happier in their independence than they had been in British days? To Abhay, the overpopulated city was a hell of ruffians and fools. Although thousands of poor people were employed in the bargaining, steel mills, and tire factories, their living conditions had worsened. Abhay voiced his concern about these conditions in his Back to Godhead. Could the poor eat the nuts and bolts produced in the factories? Could they be nourished by cinemas, television, or sex sounds on the radio? The leaders were unable to see that abandoning spiritual principles had led to the very ills they officially abhorred. A decadent, rebellious youth, corruption in every area of civic life, and even economic instability and scarcity. When Abhay had been a youth in Calcutta, there had been no cinema billboards and advertising lurid sexual fantasies. But now India had developed the third largest movie industry in the world. And film advertisements were all over Delhi. Beef shops and liquor shops had sprung up. The newspapers regularly ran editorials deploring the degradation of young Indian boys who teased, insulted, and affronted women on the street. Women's leagues complained about increased juvenile promiscuity and the obscene treatment of women in films and advertisements. But there were no upright Brahmins or saintly administrators to do anything about it. If this was the scene in 1960, what is the scene now, 64 years later? It's worst. But still, and this is how the society is going on. Abhay saw the need for a re-spiritualization of society, but society was rushing headlong in the opposite direction. In February, even as Abhay was trying to publish his Back to Godhead, Prime Minister Nehru, while speaking with concern of India's crisis of the spirit, simultaneously launched another 5-year plan for rapid industrialization. Everyone from the Prime Minister down to the common man was concerned about the symptomatic problems, but no one seemed to understand that the real problem was the lack of God consciousness. Abhay had to deliver the medicine for the ills of Kali Yuga. He knew it was needed on a much larger scale than he could reach on his own. But even to administer one issue of Back to Godhead was almost beyond his means. Writing the articles, typing them, taking them to the printer, distributing them, should not have been the work of one lone, impoverished devotee. But in working with his God brothers, he had met with their decided lack of organization and the lack of desire for vigorous preaching. Bhakti Sarang Goswami had seemed determined to keep Sajjan Toshni small, and his mutt, like so many others, had been ineffectual in attracting new members. This was the petty-mindedness that would cripple preaching. Therefore, he was now working alone on a small scale, happy in his spiritual welfare work, yet aware that his 4-page newspaper was only a drop of water in the desert. So he knew that it's not a whole lot, but still he was working. Okay. In February of 1956, while the US was struggling with civil rights, while Khrushchev and Eisenhower were both openly deploring the arms race and were maneuvering in nuclear disarmament talks, and while the Shah of Iran was visiting New Delhi, Abhay was trying to bring Back to Godhead. In winter's discomfort, he walked through the early morning streets of Delhi to visit Surendra Kumar Jain, the printer, to read the latest proofs. By walking, he saved money. Only when he was delivering paper from the paper dealer to the printer would he send a rickshaw. He had no chadar, only a lightweight cotton jacket, and he wore rubber shoes. He also wore a cotton hat that covered his ears and tied beneath his chin, protecting him from the 40-degree wintry mornings and the sometimes gusty winds. So 1956, so he was already 60 years old. And this he was doing in Delhi, cold winters of Delhi, early mornings. Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, you all are safe and wonderful. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.